You grow older, you take on new responsibilities, and you make decisions that affect your future. Yet, underneath the paperwork and the routines, there is a quiet suspicion that you are merely an experienced child, trying to figure things out as you go. You look around and assume others possess some secret understanding of how to exist, a certainty that you lack. You wait for a moment where everything clicks into place, and you suddenly feel like you finally know what you're doing. But that moment refuses to arrive. This persistent imposter syndrome isn't a personal failure. It's the natural result of a missing structural element in how we develop as modern humans. For thousands of years, human culture shared a distinct boundary separating dependent childhood from adult responsibility. Today, we live in the absence of that boundary, a space we can call the ritual gap. Ancient tribes and early civilizations utilized real, often painful, and sometimes dangerous trials as mandatory rites of passage. These were deliberate tools used to force a permanent shift in an individual's sense of self. Young men were sent into the wilderness for weeks, forced to survive without guidance or comfort. These experiences were designed to strip away dependence through a direct confrontation with fear and uncertainty. These rituals functioned as precise psychological mechanisms. By creating a sharp break between who you were and who you had to become, they ensured that when a person returned, they didn't just look different to the tribe, they felt different to themselves. These ancient rituals worked because they were accidentally tapping into a biological reality. The brain updates its internal model of the self most intensely during moments of extreme, high-stakes emotional stress. Psychologists call this identity encoding. When you survive a genuine challenge, your brain reorganizes its internal map. Enduring a trial without escape writes a permanent new narrative into the mind. You now have physiological proof you can handle responsibility. Once this encoding happens, adulthood stops being an idea you're chasing and starts being a state of being. Decisions feel different because your internal sense of self has actually caught up to your age. But in modern life, the transition from school to career is a slow, continuous blur. We are expected to function as adults, but we rarely, if ever, encounter a single high-intensity moment that forces the brain to acknowledge the change. Without that sudden shock to the system, our internal software never receives the signal to update, leaving us trapped in a perpetual state of transition. Because our environment allows us to fulfill adult roles without ever facing a defining trial, our identity remains locked in an adolescent loop. When the brain is starved for these real markers of growth, it begins hunting for external substitutes to measure progress. We look for reassurance in status, digital attention, or social comparison. These provide a momentary ego boost, but can't trigger a genuine shift in identity. Because these signals are shallow, the quiet emptiness of delayed adulthood remains. You keep making decisions, but you keep doubting yourself. The primary culprit behind this gap is the modern obsession with reducing friction and maximizing physical comfort. While safety improves our quality of life, it allows us to avoid the exact difficulties required for psychological maturation. A real break from childhood cannot happen within a comfort zone. It requires a demand that exceeds what you currently think you are capable of handling. Modern society is no longer going to provide you with a defining moment. There is no mandatory threshold waiting for you. If the transition into adulthood no longer happens to you, it is something you have to create for yourself. You have to seek out your own modern rites of passage. This means choosing responsibilities that feel uncomfortable, making high-stakes decisions where you cannot rely on anyone else, or stepping into unguided isolation. Voluntary difficulty is the only way to trigger that delayed identity update. Adulthood is no longer a milestone you reach just by getting older. It is a state of being you have to earn by stepping into it.